afternoon. I think we're expecting everyone other than Austin, so we'll just give people who are not here a minute or so to arrive.
Nikki has also sent her apologies, Andy.
Sorry?
Nikki has also sent her apologies.
Yeah, thank you. I've just seen that. Okay. Okay, it's 2:30, so I suggest we make a start. Welcome everybody to this business board meeting. As colleagues know, Austin's away on holiday, so I'm standing in as chair for today's meeting. In terms of technical arrangements, sorry?
Yes. By Councillor Holding.
Nick, can you go on mute? Thank you.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I don't believe we're quorate as yet.
Who are we missing in that case?
Just need one more private sector member.
Okay.
And I think that's Rebecca.
Rebecca and Faye.
Yeah.
Make it quorum.
When you're
Okay.
ready, Chair.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Rochelle. So I was just saying good afternoon, welcome to the meeting of the Business Board. As colleagues know, Austin Adams is away on holiday, so I'm chairing this meeting this afternoon. Clearly we are holding the meeting via Zoom, video conferencing, and the meeting's being live recorded for governance purposes. If you experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, please just refresh your connection in the first instance. And board member participation, as Rochelle has just demonstrated, will be monitored for quoracy purposes. If it becomes apparent that we've lost members and are no longer quorate, it may be necessary to adjourn, and we may have to reconvene the meeting as a telephone conference. And can I also remind board members that this is a private meeting, which means only business board members and specific officers are invited. So I trust you're all in a secure and private place. Great. To ensure that everyone's online and present, can we just confirm our names so attendance can be registered? So Tina Barsby.
Yes.
Thank you, Tina. Mark Dorset. Can't see Mark at the moment. Okay. Faye Holland.
Yep, here.
Amir Khalid.
Yeah.
Al Kingsley.
Hello.
Hi, Al. Nikki Morby. Nikki sent her apologies. Jason Mellard. Okay, can't see Jason. Nitin Patel.
Yep.
Rebecca Stevens.
Hello.
Hi. Kelly Swingler. I haven't seen Kelly yet either. Okay. Mayor James Palmer.
Afternoon.
Hi, James. Councillor John Holditch. Afternoon, John. I can see you. We can't hear you, but we can see you. And Andy Neely as well. Thanks. Nick, Nick, any additional apologies?
Thanks, Chair. No further apologies from Austin and Nikki.
Okay, great, thank you. And then declarations of interest. Does anybody have any interests on the items that we're covering today? I have one to declare, which is on item 3.3, which is in connection with the growth service. And Rochelle, it would be helpful if we could sort out someone to chair that particular part of the meeting, because I will leave for that piece.
Yes, can I call for a nomination for vice chair for that item, please, members?
I saw Amir waving his hand. And Rebecca also, actually.
Andy, I was about to mention a conflict, actually, but
Oh, okay, fine.
if you want me to.
Let me come back to that. So Amir, you were volunteering, I think, to...
Yes, well, I was asked to volunteer, so I'm very happy to volunteer.
Okay, is everyone happy for Amir to chair item 3.3? Yep,
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Rebecca, sorry, your conflict.
The local growth fund item, I input into their Peterborough Council's bid, so I probably should excuse myself for that, although there's no conflict financially.
Okay, great. People are happy, presumably, for you to stay, Rebecca, but if we get into on the final decision, it may be best not to participate.
Of course.
Yep. James, your hand is up.
Yes, nothing more than I have to leave for another meeting at 4. So if I disappear, please accept my apologies if we're still going by 4, of course. In your excellent chairmanship, I'm sure that we'll whiz through and be done.
I will do my best. I'm conscious there are lots of demands on people's time, and so getting through stuff quickly is good when we can. Okay. Yep.
Andy, sorry.
Okay.
Also, I have a 4:30, which was the original end time of the meeting. So
Okay.
If that causes an issue with quorum, I can always drop out and then come back in. So we'll just monitor that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we'll try and motor ahead. Okay, no other conflicts of interest. So the minutes of the last meeting, 27th of July, we're asked to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of July as a correct record. So if you disagree with this approval, can you just raise your hand? I'm going to take silence as agreement, basically. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think that's the minutes approved. So we'll take those as carried. Do we have any updates on the action log other than those already in the agenda? John, do you want to pick that up?
I can do that, Chair.
Thank you.
So the action log, all actions have been completed to date. There's one which is still ongoing, and that's around stakeholder mapping. That we've still got a couple of outstanding dialogues to have with a few members. Otherwise, yes, good news that most of them have been signed off, completed and actioned.
Great. So those members who haven't had a chance to do the stakeholders, this was just a request for 10 or so key contacts, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll follow up. We'll follow up online to chase the outstanding one.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's move to 2.1, the Business Board Finance Update. Vanessa, do you want to present this report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the interest of expediency, I will be as brief as I possibly can. Just realised my video wasn't on, sorry. As previously, the paper is presenting the updated financial position relating to the revenue and capital funding lines within the Business and Skills Directorate, particularly those under the control of the Business Board. The figures are up to the end of July. And this time around, we have also mentioned something with regards to the MTFP future budget setting that we're starting the process of for the board to consider. So I've just put it forward to you for questions if there are any.
Great, thank you. Any questions from board members on the finance update? I had one comment, or just an observation in Appendix 2. It's worth noting that in 2021, the budget for the business board is about 6 million. And then in 21-22, it drops quite significantly. Now there'll be ongoing discussions with government and so on, but we need to keep an eye on the potential funding cliff edges that we come to at various points. Faye.
So I had a quick question on Appendix 2, actually. So I would pick this one up. Marketing and promotion of services seems woefully low. So my question is the marketing, there's an awful lot of programs there to be promoting and raising the profile of. So is the promotion of it included within the line items, and therefore the separate marketing line is just general?
There has been in the past, yes. This year, the budget for 2021, there have been some top slices from other programs, including skills related programs, to give us a larger pot. The true budget is 145,000, as there's another 50,000 on top of there that's already included within the LGF program costs and the AEB skills program costs. The environment didn't quite work with that, so they've remained in their actual budgets. Going forward, this was something that we agreed earlier this year. It was a new line. We've never done this before. We've never had specific marketing lines. So we're just trying to make it more cost effective and economise across the whole directorate. So this is something that we will be looking at doing going forward, but until we sort of get additional funding lines coming into the Business and Skills Directorate, particularly for Business Board areas, we can't commit to higher figures than we have at present.
Okay. John, is your point of follow-up to that? Because otherwise I have Al. So John and then Al.
Yes, it is. Just checking I was unmuted. Big point to note here that we've never done marketing before, because our growth hub is our only service and it is reactive, not proactive. So this is a big step forward for us. But the really big point is that this is a very small budget for marketing compared to the real one, which is hidden within what I'll be talking about later, which is the FBC for the Business Growth Service. That's a £15 million service to businesses, and that has a significant marketing budget within it, to a level possibly 10 times that 150k.
Al, let me bring you in.
Thanks, Andy. It was just a comment on the finance tables on Appendix 1. The 2021 spend forecast is showing 1.7 million as a total, but the numbers above it equate to 2.7 million. So it either shows us 700 ahead of the project budget, or there's something erroneous in there.
I need to check this. I can only assume there's something erroneous in the tables. The tables were cut and pasted from an alternative report. So whether there's just been something gone wrong, I can only apologise and check that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps we could circulate a clarification afterwards, Vanessa.
Yes, I will do.
Great. Any other comments on this? No, not seeing any. So I'd like to remind members that recommendations to the Business Board are carried out by consensus unless there's an objection, in which case there will be a vote. In the event of a vote, Nick will ask each member whether they wish to vote in favour or against the recommendation, or indeed to abstain. And the recommendation here is just to note. So can we all agree that the finance update has been noted?
Yep.
Yep, thank you. Okay. 2.2, the Local Growth Fund Programme. Steve, I think you're going to present this. Steve, you're on mute.
Hello everyone. Sorry about that. Just coming in. Yes, this is the usual Local Growth Fund and Getting Building Fund now, strategic update, if you like. I won't unpack the whole 10 pages because there's rather a lot there, so I will whiz through and pick out some of the key points and highlights. First up, there was the Getting Building Fund call for projects back in June. After that exercise, the Business Board agreed that we should do some kind of quick lessons learned. So this item here just basically was a very quick and dirty look at that process, how it went, and then what things we can learn from it. some of the key points are Appendix A covers off the key points of learning from that. So some of the points are quite simple in terms of what we do to promote or coordinate. Some of the points are a little more deeper in terms of review of our actual evaluation processes and how we build our bigger pipeline of opportunities with partners. Just to conclude on that Getting Building Fund, the actual selected project for that allocation is currently going through the local assurance process, and we anticipate bringing a formal application to the business board during October or possibly the November meeting. Moving on to Local Growth Fund itself, the annual payment, the board will be aware it's being paid to us this year in chunks. We've had 2/3 of this year's payment back in May. The final third will be released in parts to us during October and January. This is subject to the Cities and Local Growth Unit team being happy with our progress on contracting projects. Our last submission to them was on the 14th of August, and we will be making another submission in October, under which they'll obviously consider release of further funding. The programme position for local growth funding, we currently, as at 14th of August, we had 16 projects, including the COVID grant scheme, that were live in delivery. We had 7 projects that were approved but were in contract negotiation. Since the 14th of August, we have 3 of those 7 projects have actually signed. So it's actually down to 4 now, outstanding. There were 2 projects approved last board, and the remaining funding left to be allocated after that point was 853,000. But we've had notification from one of our other projects, the Illumina Genomics Accelerator project. They are saying they're going to undershoot by at least 300,000 this financial year. It could go more, but we're taking at least 300,000. So we're adding that to make a new balance to allocate to new projects of 1.153 million. We've received a project change request from Photocentric in relation to their project. Due to an unprecedented level of growth in their business due to COVID-19 contracts, they've requested a change to the grant 1.85 million use, which is a change to buy a different building to the one they had previously suggested. It makes no difference to the outputs on jobs and skills that they were pitching towards. The change request is at confidential Appendix B for the board to note and approve. As of 14th of August, the spend in the LGF programme was 89,229,000, and obviously the spend is still running well behind. We're still contracting, and as I've said, at the very early stages, so spend is beginning to grow. There are 22 completed local growth fund projects, which are now subject to evaluation over the coming weeks and months. The monitoring return for Q1 this financial year is at Appendix C for the board to note. We returned that on the 21st of August to the local Cities and Local Growth team. We've also been compiling and updating our issue log, which can be seen at Appendix D. And the extract in the paper at 5.4 is the RAG rating of projects from the return to the Cities and Local Growth Unit, where there are currently no red flag projects as at the end of Q1. COVID Business Capital Grants Programme is closed, but we are obviously still paying the claims to the businesses, and as at 14th of August it was 1.8 million, and actually the claims levels have ramped considerably in the last 3 weeks, so we expect that money to now pour out the door. Eastern Agritech Growth Initiative, we've got 11 applications which are currently either being appraised or are about to be appraised, which is good to see, and in no small part is to the change of criteria in terms of added interest. So there will be several programme boards virtually over the coming 2 months to approve those new agri-tech projects. Evaluation and monitoring update. We've commissioned Metro Dynamics and their partner Exogen to conduct the deeper evaluation on our historical completed projects. They plan to provide obviously a summary of each of the projects and an overall programmed summary of that phase 1 to the business board in due course. And Appendix E is a suggested reporting format for the monitoring that the Local Growth Fund team are using currently, which gives the board a RAG status for a couple of key milestones, which is spend to the end of March 2021 and a RAG status for the actual jobs being created against what was originally forecast for those projects. Point 8, audits. The Audit and Governance Committee have commissioned and undertaken an internal audit across the last year. This is to note for the business board that their findings from the original report had 9 recommendations. The follow-up has found that all recommendations have been actioned, and the opinion in the audit is now that the business board's work is now sitting at substantial under governance and local assurance. And the audit can be found by following the link in the report. And finally, review of our internal processes. One of the actions mentioned earlier in item 2, the Getting Building Lessons Learned. We've kicked off a review of the whole LGF process, trying to review and put changes and more robust steps in for when we get new funding, new programs. Andy has kindly volunteered to help us in the review of those processes, and we'll be looking to meet a couple more times over the next 2 months. The first meeting took place on the 18th of August, and the scope of the review, which was determined at that meeting, is attached at Appendix F.
Great, thank you, Steve. That's a very comprehensive update, but it was also a really clear report, so very helpful. Comments from board members or questions? And then we'll come to the particular things that we're invited to deal with. Can I just comment, Steve, from the Appendix E dashboard, I think is a really helpful thing for us to see as a sort of summary of how things are going. And it was great to see the progress on the compliance stuff as well in Section 8. So well done on that. James, you wanted to comment?
Thank you.
Yes, just to say I've recently been out to 3 of the companies that we helped during lockdown with grants of almost 50,000 each, and I was extraordinarily impressed with what they were doing. One company was making valves to retrofit into air conditioning systems. These valves were controllable from anywhere in the world. Not something unusual in a new system, but to retrofit is quite a tricky thing, and they were selling them in Dubai, across the Far East, and in the United States, and the £50,000 that we helped them with just kept their business running effectively. Another guy was a vegetable packer and distributor who saw the opportunity to buy 2 refrigerated vans and completely changed his business model to deliver to private households. And again, he had 40 members of staff, none of which were furloughed, none of whom were made redundant, and he was able to, with the help of money from the business board of the COVID Cabinet Grant Scheme, he was able to continue and grow his business during lockdown. And the other company was an extraordinary company in Wisbech that effectively designs and makes early stage products for the medical industry and works very much through Cambridge as well. And he, just the same as the other two companies, this company with a £50,000 grant that we gave them was able to buy a machine and extend their premises and work all the way through lockdown. So extraordinary difference that you what you do as a business board and what the staff of the Combined Authority and the business board are doing to make these interventions that are just transformational for business. So it gave me a great deal of pleasure, as you can imagine, and can't wait to go out to talk to more of these businesses. And the energy and enthusiasm is palpable. And the one thing that was constant with all three of the businesses that I went to is, when are you going to give us more grants out? We want to get some more money, which is understandable. So just a pat on the back to all the people involved, really.
That's great. Particularly, it's nice to hear stories like that show success and indeed the impact of some of the funding that's provided. It is worth thinking, and back to the discussion we were having earlier about marketing, it's worth thinking about how we get some of those stories out more widely to the business community, because they can be quite inspiring for people. Al?
Sorry, Andy, it's just a quick one. I was just going to say, I think the summary that's provided in terms of the job creation, the monitoring of the current projects, that format is really helpful. The one thing that might be a useful addition is some sense of project timeline, because clearly most of them are in the early stages, but there isn't a measure as to jobs created based on a predicted timeline that was originally quoted, just to add a bit of context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we can do that.
Great, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Al. Any other comments before we come to the particular proposals? No? Okay.
Sorry.
So, sorry, Nitin.
Just on the grant and these three stories, which are brilliant, but in terms of a longer term issue, would we ever see us saying they put some money back in the pot so we can help other people do the same thing if the grant actually, because that story with the valve, I mean, the company's going to survive, and I think it's great that we did it at the time. But maybe if there's something, and I don't know whether it's doable or not, but it's just a thought, because there's a lot of help going out. Should they actually put something back in the pot for future if they come out well of it? I mean, we are a business board after all.
I think part of the argument there, Nitin, is by the firms growing and creating employment, then the individuals are contributing to the economy, they're paying taxes, etc. So there is definitely a return on the investment that's more indirect. I mean, I think you raise an interesting question about whether individual firms might support things locally.
I just wonder whether, you know, we like to do things differently, and supporting some of these high growth companies with grants is really good. But on the same basis, there's companies who probably need help other times. And maybe there is a view that, you know, it's not going to happen today, I know, but it's just something that maybe we need to think about as we go forward if intervention is going to be a big part of it.
Okay. I've John and then Rebecca.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just to respond there to Nitin. Yes, we have all three interventions at our disposal, and Steve has used all three. Those of course being a loan that they do indeed pay back, and there are at least 3 loans that we've got in the portfolio at the moment that I can think of, and Steve will tell us what the names of the people are. A lot of grants we've given out, and of course everything over 3 mil is always scored higher in the evaluation if it's equity investment, and we do definitely get it back. So we do use all 3, and hopefully when Steve's presenting each application to you, he's explaining why we've gone for a loan or a grant or an equity investment. But we do use all 3, and we should be explaining why we've used each of them every time we present to you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Rebecca?
Yeah, just to follow on from that, I'm thinking about the future, and what we're doing with these grants is creating a load of champions and successful businesses for the future, and how we revisit them in a year, 2 years, 3 years time to leverage what we originally did by giving them the grant, and to write the success stories and to do the PR that says, well, actually, we supported this business back in 2019 and look at it, and keeping those connections so that those managing directors or whoever, you know, sing the praises of the business and what we're doing for the business community. It's not about a one-off, here's some money and leave it at that. It's the ongoing relationship, isn't it?
Absolutely. That might be something, John, for the team just to pick up and think about how we track some of the case examples. I mean, some of the firms will come back repeatedly, but there may well be others that we think actually it's worth tracking that as an example. And with some of the data that Metro Dynamics are producing, you've got the high level data, but then some of the case studies that go with it are quite useful. James, do you want to comment on that?
Well, not much specifically, but just to make sure that you are aware, when I visited the companies, I did so with one of the Combined Authorities comms team.
Yeah.
And we were putting, obviously comms will go out. I'm going to put some stuff on social media on my page, which I will boost in each of the towns that we visited, but also there's going to be press releases, etc. out of that. So just want you to be aware that we're going to try and get around a lot of places all over Cambridgeshire, and we want to shout from the rooftops and tell them what the business board is doing for the economy.
Great, thank you. John, is yours an old hand or is it a new one?
It's not a legacy hand, as I like to call them. Yeah, I was just going to, Mayor sort of beat me to it. Emily Martin and a new wonderful young man called Ryan that we've just employed as our PR person. The three visits that the Mayor would have gone on would have been on our, what Emily Martin calls our PR grid. So, but what we can give business board members is a grid of all of the grants we've given, and then show you which of those grants we've actually done PR on or are planning to do PR on. But yes, we absolutely look at all of them and then select probably 10 or 15% that we think would make really good stories, and they're on a grid, and we'll make sure that I'll ask Brian Hyland, who's in charge of the PR, to make sure that he gets you all that PR grid for next time.
That would be really helpful. And it may well be that business board members would like to join some of those visits sometimes. And we have talked previously about holding business board meetings when we can meet face to face in different venues around the region. So we could come back to that when we're out of this slightly weird world we live in currently. Okay, there are three things that we're invited to do on this paper. So the first is to recommend to the Combined Authority approval of the project change request for the photocentric LGF project. And this is an example of a company that's done remarkably well through COVID and therefore needs extra capacity. Are people happy to approve the project change request? Yep. Seeing lots of nods. Yeah. Second is recommend all the programme updates outlined in the paper to the Combined Authority Board. Again, people happy. Yeah. And then the third is to note the funding position and forecast for the Local Growth Fund projects in delivery. Good. Thank you. So let's move on to item 2.3, Local Growth Fund project proposals. And Steve.
Yes, hi again. As indicated in the previous paper, we have 1.153 million of LGF left to allocate. And for the purposes of considering these two projects, if we were to fund both, we would have to use 433,000 from our remaining recycled funding that sits in that pot. That's funding that's been out as LGF or loans, as we've just mentioned, and come back in. So that makes a total to allocate of 1.586 million. The projects that we're bringing forward here to consider that funding came about as a result of discussion and action from the COVID-19 Cambridgeshire and Peterborough City Centre Exit Strategy Group on the 7th of July. So both projects have submitted projects for local assurance framework consideration. Both projects are seeking to deliver capital investment in the short term. Well, that was the brief, sorry. To to support the visitor economy in the city centres, targeting businesses with support to aid safe adaptation and aiming to reopen and revive city centre economies far more than where we're at currently. The first project is the Peterborough Builds Back Better. This is a request for a grant of 800,000 against the total project cost of 983,000. This project was to basically create what they're calling a cafe culture project in the 1,000 square metres of the Cathedral Square in Peterborough. The capital works will include, amongst other things, multi-purpose lighting, all-weather covering, seating, and the plan is to obviously increase the use, the dwell time, and support those in the hospitality sector and the businesses who obviously operate in that city centre. Job creation, the project is projecting 100 jobs directly connected to the city centre and 200 jobs indirectly supported through supply chain knock-on effect. So a total of 300 jobs, which equates to a £2,667 per job, which is very, very good in comparison to some of the other projects we've brought forwards. So that's that one. I don't think there's much more to say. Obviously, the risks were quite well articulated on this one, and are sort of in the gift of the council who are leading this project. Things like the planning permission, and then obviously just any capital cost overruns. So,
can I suggest we take comments or questions on this one and deal with it, and then come to the second one? And I'm assuming colleagues have had a chance to read the paper, so we don't need to go through all of the detail on the proposal. But any comments or questions on this particular project? No? Are people happy to support this one? So the recommendation is that the Combined Authority Board approve funding for the project, the Peterborough City Centre project. Everyone's happy to support that. Tina?
I just want to say I was on the EAP for this project, and the enthusiasm of the people presenting it, the way they thought through what they were going to do, and the fact that it had would have an immediate impact, I think made it a really attractive project.
Great. Al, sorry, I've just noticed your hand was up.
That's okay. Tina has largely summarised what I was going to say. I thought it was a really strong one, and in terms of the criteria we worked to and the likelihood of delivering the timescales, I thought it was a really, really strong bid.
Yeah. So I'm seeing I'm seeing unanimous support for this. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Can we talk about the second one then, the Cambridge Marketplace project? Steve, just give us a quick summary of this one.
Yeah, sure. So this one is 700,000 grant to a total cost of this first part of the project of 700,000. So that's 100%. That wasn't the sole funding for the actual whole development, though. This project's subtly different. This one was for massive rework concept designs and for a rework of the market, so that there was new stall designs, layout management, and could accommodate a range of other uses for that market square. It included things like underground waste management system. It did include outdoor seating, but it also included an awful lot of work potentially in the heritage features, replacement of the granite sets and outdoor lighting. The project, though, was seeking funding in this early stage. It's not a short-term project in reality. The cost they were seeking here was to develop this project from up to REBA stage 1, and then obviously they would need to secure funding to take it on further to the further stages and then into construction. So in terms of jobs, the job creation turns out at about 34. They were talking about safeguarding 170 jobs and 10 direct market staff. But in the appraisers report, they talk about a potential pro rata because of the further works which are not funded as part of this project at this stage. So they were suggesting that it's a maximum of 34 jobs, which equates to around 20,000 per job. And that's it really for this one. I think there were risks, sorry. There was some quite hefty risks in the sense that we could make this grant investment and then they may not be able to secure further funding and moving to construction. So, you know, there could be an abandoned project and then reclaiming the grant could be tricky.
Okay, thank you. Very clear. Al or Tina, you were on the...
I was as well, yeah.
Yeah, do you want to add any comments from that perspective?
I think there was a clear comparison difference between the two. One was a short term and was going to influence jobs very quickly. The other one was very complicated, probably needs to be done in the long term, but really didn't fit the criteria of what we were measuring for the short term grant. And I think they were told that, you know, they need to do what they're doing, but they actually need to think about the money they're asking for and what's the short-term gain, which is what the grant was about. I think, yeah. Tina, I don't know whether you have a similar view.
Absolutely. And of course, this refurbishing, doing up the market square has been something that's been talked about in Cambridge for a very long time. And I suppose it didn't help them that we did see the Peterborough one at the same time, which in contrast was real action that would have short-term impact.
Yeah. Al, your hand's up.
Yeah, and I think that covered the key points. The big one was that this is spent purely or largely for design and architect fees for a project there's no further funding for. There was conversation after the process about whether they'd perhaps misunderstood the brief and there was an opportunity for them to revisit it in the short term. I don't know whether that actually happened, but I think there was a fairly strong consensus based on what they presented that it didn't really meet the brief.
Yeah. Any other questions on this? I think this... No? Okay, so I think there's two parts to this. The first is the recommendation. The recommendation is that we, that the combined authority decline approval of funding at this time for the Cambridge Marketplace project. Nobody's disagreeing with that. And then there is this point, Al, you've just raised about whether we encourage them to consider reapplying, but with a scaled down, highly focused capital investment project that meets the criteria. I mean, given the importance of restarting or kickstarting town-based activities, that would seem quite sensible, providing they come up with something that actually is as inspiring and as interesting as the Peterborough project seemed to be. But views on that? Should we be encouraging a resubmission, a rescoping and a resubmission?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing general support that that's what we should do. So could you pick that up with them, Steve, and encourage a resubmission, but maybe work with them to make sure they understand the rules of what they're bidding for?
Yeah, no problem. We can do that.
Great. Thank you. 3.1, the COVID-19 evidence and insight report. We're going to be joined by guests. Are they in the waiting room? Oh, magically, people are appearing. Hi, Alan.
This is the first phase of delivery of the integrated economic, business and skills insight work. This first report is the impact of COVID-19 and was produced by Metro Dynamics. I am joined today by Patrick and Nathan from Metro Dynamics. I acknowledge the report is lengthy, but we've never faced such a huge impact as COVID-19, and there was a lot for us to cover. Following feedback from today, the report will be refined to go to CA Board on the 30th of September. There we are seeking sign-off to share with partners, stakeholders, etc. In addition, the report will be the basis for a monthly dashboard from October 20 through to March 21. And we are just starting to look at the technical side and content of that dashboard. The report will enable CPCA to better design the focus of interventions and be a key part of the local economic recovery strategy and obviously the newly formed Business Growth Service. This report will be refreshed in March, April 21. I'm going to hand over to Patrick to give an overview of the report before opening up for further discussion.
Great, thank you, Alan. Patrick, welcome.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chair, Mr. Mayor and Alan. I just wanted to recap on some of the kind of main points from our work so far, and I'm going to just share a very small number of slides with you, just to draw out some of the main points. But just to start by kind of really emphasising what Alan said, that this is the first part of a longer piece of work with you. The aim is really to identify the things which we need to watch with you over the course of the next kind of 6 months and beyond, as the kind of longer term and real kind of economic impact of what is going on at the moment kind of becomes apparent, and how we tease out the kind of indicators and the things to look for which are of most relevance to you and what you're trying to do, particularly given what appears to be a bit of a growing gap between some of the kind of macro level economic indicators which are looking okay, and some of the some of the kind of people focused economic indicators across the country which are looking very less than okay. So what we watch over the next kind of 6 months is as important, I think, as what the kind of data is showing us right now, because a lot of the data we're looking at right now is retrospective. So this is very much the start of working with you over the next kind of few months. But let's just kind of recap on what we are seeing. Emily, would you mind seeing if we can share the slides? If we can, great. If we can't, no worries. Excellent. So just 6 slides to talk through very quickly. So this slide just summarises what the data was showing in terms of overall economic economic output and universal credit claimants up until kind of July. Overall, in Q2, you saw a reduction of about 1.4 billion across the CPCA, which would equate to about a 21%, 22% annualised fall in output. We do not yet have Q3 figures. We will have Q3 figures by the time you meet in October, but they're not available on a regional basis yet. Although what we have seen is the UK economy as a whole recover by about 6.6% in July, but that's not yet made up anything close to 50% of the kind of fall in Q2. So you would expect to see some recovery in Q3, but I suspect it will not get you back up to anything like to kind of where you were. And I'll come back to some of what this might look like in the future, in a couple of minutes. We're very keen, if we could just jump onto the next slide, we're very keen over the next kind of few months to really try and get a bit of a feel for the differential impacts of this recession and the kind of ongoing pandemic in the different parts of your economy. And, you know, you'll remember the work that we did a couple of years ago now on the SPEAR was really about trying to understand the dynamics of going on in your kind of sub-regional economies too. So we've just started to kind of scratch away at this, and a couple of interesting things. This slide just shows some of the kind of overall output loss in Q2, roughly divided into your 3 sub-regional economies, and it's not possible to do that precisely, but we've just kind of roughly grouped local authorities into each one. So forgive us for ignoring some of the overlaps at this stage, but I think that's okay just in terms of illustrating the point. A few things jump out. I mean, essentially a 5% or greater output loss across the patch, but with some important and interesting kind of variations. Cambridge has suffered most, both in terms of total, but also as a percentage and its starting point. And that is essentially dominated by the kind of professional, scientific and technical kind of world, as we would expect. But what's interesting, and if you look at comparator, buried in your pack are some slides around kind of comparator economies, these high value kind of, high productivity global kind of services, which have traditionally been seen as being pretty resilient have suffered and have suffered hard, given the global nature of of what we're seeing at the moment. And what's interesting about this is actually, at one level, your ability, the UK's ability to actually do anything about this is really limited. These are global companies dealing with kind of global travel and all the rest of it. Some interesting, I think the kind of basic, really flipping obvious, but it does bear saying point here is that all sectors have been affected, not as badly as the OBR originally thought they would be, but they all have been. So if you're Peterborough and your dominant sector is kind of manufacturing, which it basically is, then actually that's seen your significant, your largest kind of fall in output over that period. Ditto, where you're kind of I think Fenland has been slightly protected, but not much. Is the kind of basic answer here. So this damage has been affected kind of across the piece. Next slide, please. And the furlough scheme is continuing to be used very heavily across nearly all sectors, and this is worth bearing in mind, because if you've been reading your FT and looking at you're sad like me and you look at Institute of Employment kind of studies, then you will see a lot of people now starting to try and get to grips with the emerging impacts of furlough scheme being withdrawn. And it's too early to say yet. We don't know what government are actually going to do, but what we can say with a fairly high degree of certainty is that a large number of companies across most sectors are continuing to use the scheme. So the employment and the labour market kind of impacts of all this are yet to wash out. Next slide, please. And what you can see,
Patrick, it's Andy. Sorry, on that previous slide.
Yeah, of course.
I was just doing a quick add up. So we're saying something like, if I'm reading the little circles correctly, something like 20,000 businesses across the region are you still making use of the furlough scheme?
Yes, that's about right. Yeah.
It's just to get a sense of the scale. It's quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the long pack, we've taken some of the local data about how that might translate into numbers of people. And he said he threw it very rapidly. I mean, this is the end of July, but that's probably about 115,000 people. Essentially, job vacancies are down, and job vacancies are down across. So if you flip to the next slide, Emily, it'd be brilliant. Thank you. Job postings are down, and they have started to recover more quickly in some sectors than others, and construction is probably showing the greatest kind of uptick, as you'd expect, but job vacancies are down. And interestingly, there's some data that appears to show that nationally some lower skilled vacancies are coming back more quickly, but that doesn't appear to be the case yet in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So we just need to keep an eye. I don't really understand. I just did check the data there, to be honest, over the next couple of months, but we need to keep an eye on kind of which kinds of vacancies are reappearing. And then next slide.
Sorry,
yeah.
Patrick, one other thing on this. This is important. The previous slide's important because actually in previous recessions, you wouldn't have seen the same picture certainly for the professional and scientific and technical services. As you said, they tended to be very resilient. And we're seeing both significant reductions, but not as much coming back in terms of vacancies appearing.
One of the things we chatted about in the skills board yesterday was that one of the symptoms of that, I think, will be lots of people with significant employment experience coming into the labour market again, and leaving jobs. And if you combine that with a lot of young people trying to get into the labour market, then there is some, you can start to draw a sense of how this particular set of labour market issues might look over the period ahead, and indeed what you then might do about some of that. So next slide, please. So what we've tried to do, and data is fantastic. It's great. We all love it. But on its own, it doesn't help us very much. And what we've started to do, and what we're working with your sector groups now, and with kind of skills colleagues and things over the next kind of few weeks, is to start looking at this kind of early data and the new data that we get over the kind of period ahead, and then to start think about what this actually means for your priorities and your individual kind of strategies, and what the kind of framing is for starting to think about refreshing those and making them consistent with our sort of new economic reality. I'm not going to try and say anything kind of trite about what this all means, because it's still really, really too early to say. And I think, Mike, Emmerich and I sort of get a little bit fed up with people sort of trying to draw flash conclusions about this already, because I'm not sure you can. I think there is something really interesting, though, about the divergence between the kind of headline economic indicators and some of the kind of labour market stuff that's going on. And I think that what that probably means for you is not a whole-scale root and branch rewrite of your, core objectives and your focus on, overall output and productivity and the rest of it. I think it's about delivery, and I think it's about how you focus your kind of interventions over the period ahead. And I think that's get-atable, that's doable, but it requires quite a granular look at sort of the actual detail of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to focus. So just by way of a kind of very immediate and probably too obvious example, when Councillor Holditch and I were talking about this last week, we talked about clearly the need to stay really close to the ground in terms of actual business closures, actual business impact, actual recruitment over the next kind of period. So there's kind of localized intelligence, being quick to match, being quick to kind of bring people together, being quick to link people to retraining opportunities and things. Very practical stuff. It's going to be really important in the period ahead. And as I said, essentially this slide is just the kind of outline, and over the next few weeks we're working with a whole range of your kind of sector colleagues to kind of flesh this up and to work out what this actually might mean as we get more of the data in. And then final slide, please, and then I will shut up. So where to from here? So essentially we need to fill in these gaps over the period ahead. As I said, we don't have Q3 data yet, and we played with some frankly spurious ways of trying to forecast it and stopped because we realized we were sort of on thin ice. But you can see on the left hand side here that this is just kind of UK overall GDP. So it is on the way back up, and I would expect that to continue, probably not as steeply when we start looking at kind of quarter three kind of figures. But if you look at the right, one of the really interesting things you see here is that new universal credit claimants have kind of dropped back to where you were, basically, and that's pretty much that's kind of pretty much true across the patch as a whole. But of course, there's a difference between universal credit and employment. There were lots of people who were on the furlough scheme who started to access universal credit over the early part of this period. And there were lots of forecasts floating around today about significant upticks in unemployment over the next few months. But the short answer is we don't really know. We should get some localized HR1 data via IER and things, which may help us over the course of the next couple of weeks. But really, what we've got to watch over the course of the next few months is all the indicators that essentially make up the relationship between these two charts. What happens to overall output is interesting and important, but really important is what that actually means in terms of local labour markets and businesses and what's going on. And that's what we want to kind of track and work on in the period ahead. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Very happy to answer any more detailed questions as you need.
Great, thank you, Patrick. That's really helpful, and we've talked for a while as a board about getting better data on what's going on across the region, and clearly at the moment, given the changes that we're facing, I think this kind of insight's helpful. So getting regular input on this is useful. But let me open up to the board. Any questions or comments from colleagues? No? Okay. Oh, sorry, Faye.
Sorry, I was trying to do way too many things there. Patrick, thank you. I think one point, I think it's very good to have consistent, robust evidence. So thank you for that input. The other thing that I think is very important for us as a board is having this regular dashboard, because things are going to change. So having the base and having the dashboard, I think is really important for us. One thing that when I read it, and I do have to read it in much more detail too, that jumped out at me was the whole thing on manufacturing. So as well as us focusing on tactical, I also think we have an opportunity to look in a much more strategic way as well. So this is probably slightly outside the scope of the discussion, but I just want to put it out there. You know, one thing we have learned over the last few months is we need to produce more things locally, and we need to improve our supply chains. And if we're seeing that the hardest hit in 3 out of 5 is in the manufacturing sector, then I think that gives us a huge opportunity for spreading the wealth a little bit across the segment. So I kind of don't know what my answer is, but I think that's jumping out as something that is a potential of interest focus that will benefit the entire area. And then my only other comment is I was slightly surprised about PST taking such a hit, because we are not seeing that at all. It's, you know, it is still really buoyant. So that was the one that did surprise me a little bit. So they're just really my comments and observations, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Faye. Jason, and then Amir.
Yes, just to echo what Faye said, Patrick, it's an excellent report, and I'm also looking forward to reading it in more detail. One of the questions I have for you is kind of a forecast. Given what's happening now in Europe and increasing cases, it seems like we could potentially be heading towards another lockdown. And I was just wondering, from your report now, obviously it'll change going forward, what do you think would be, let's say, some of the top 3 key learnings that we could implement to ensure that if we do go into another lockdown, that is not as severe of an impact on the economy as it was the first time around?
That is a deeply good question. I don't write down what I say, because what do I think? I'm not going to forecast. I think you're 6 months into a global pandemic. And I think phase 1 and phase 2 is a slightly, probably will turn out to be an inaccurate way of looking at that. What I think you tend to see happen in other global pandemics is an initial spike and then quite a long series of kind of bumpy bits. That's a technical phrase. I think government will try its damnedest to avoid a lockdown that occurs in the same way as the last one, and I think this helps answer the question, because so first off, if I think we literally shut down the economy again, then I am not sure there is very much different that you can do locally than you did last time, because effectively you've just shut down, and that will depend on large, you know, the economic impact of that will have to be dealt with in some way through a continuation or ramping up of large-scale government schemes that are about due to come to an end. My hunch, though, is that we may not see that, but what we will see is tightening in individual places or in individual aspects of economic activity. So you could see pubs closed again, for example, and I think. So my personal view is that the downside of the way in which the UK has responded to this is it's used national measures, it's done it in a top-down way, and that's good if you want to set up a national furlough scheme, but it's very bad indeed if you actually want to take a localised approach to managing an outbreak in somewhere like Cambridge or indeed any Peterborough or indeed anywhere else. So the thing we should actually do better, and this is not totally or indeed wholly within your control, is to manage the response locally and to work out how you put in place, alongside local track and trace, how you put in place local intelligence and local support systems for those businesses which are affected in those places where we might lock down again. And that's a big deal for the UK government. But I'm not sure that aspect of it is probably the thing which worked least well last time. So it's the thing that I think we should get much better at if we try and do it again. Although I should say, and I was talking to people in central government about this morning, I see no sign of that localised approach being very much, very high up the agenda at the moment.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I guess just to add on before the next question is, I would love to see learnings from local area businesses that have been hard hit but have managed to weather the storm. I know from personal experience in the retail sector, for example, there have been some who've been more creative, certain pubs that are doing takeaway now, certain ones that are doing, home delivery, who knows what it may be. But maybe that's something for us to take away as a learning now. Can we get area businesses that have had creative solutions that have worked, that they might be able to share those more widely with their peers?
Yep, great. Amir.
Yeah, I didn't see a graph of furlough per week or per month going, and a prediction to the end of October. Are we coming to a cliff where all the people that have been furloughed, they'll come to October, and then a massive redundancies take place in November? Especially because you show professional, scientific, and technology as the biggest area suffering. Do we have any predictions for November?
At the moment, I think I would stick with the basic assumption that a significant number of redundancies are either about to come into the system or are sort of already been notified but not yet done, and that they will start to be done once the furlough scheme comes to an end. My personal view is that the cliff edge won't be as dramatic as some people think it might be, because at the end of the day, people don't shed staff that quickly. But I think you will see, my suspicion is you will see a definite uptick in actual unemployment once the furlough scheme, if the furlough scheme comes to an end. But again, I wouldn't be surprised particularly if jumping back to the last point, if what we see is some targeted restrictions on specific bits of the economy, then you may see some targeted extension of the furlough scheme to deal with some of that. So, lock down pubs again, and maybe, the government responds to that through the furlough scheme. So I think my view is the labour market implications of this are not yet visible. They will become visible into November, and you will see an increase in unemployment. I think how government responds to that and which sectors that occurs in really depends on what happens partly with the infection rate over the course of the next kind of 3 or 4 weeks.
I think that's why your comment, Patrick, about us watching carefully the distinction between the national picture and the local labour market is so crucial. And the comment made it, 115,000 people across the region are on furlough at the moment. Some will go back to their jobs, some undoubtedly will be made redundant. I'm hearing some stories of that now. And even if there is a sort of targeted extension of the furlough scheme, some firms may go, actually, we've already started down the redundancy process, we're going to see it through. So we undoubtedly will see an uptick in terms of unemployment locally. But I think us really getting a nuanced understanding of that is quite crucial. And
that some of that will come literally as a surprise, because firms only have to notify DWP of redundancies that are more than 20 and so on. But quite a lot of it, particularly larger scale, won't come as a surprise. So in specific response to Amir's question about timing, we ought to know over the course of the kind of first few weeks of October, last few weeks of September, what people are notifying in terms of what they're intending to do in November. So we ought to get we will get some notice of it, and that will be reflected in the actions that DWP and Job Centre Plus and others and you take locally. So it shouldn't come as a total shock, although some of it will do, because small scale redundancies can happen very quickly.
I'm not seeing any other hands up. Okay, so just in terms of next steps with this, you're going to do or Metro Dynamics is going to do the sort of regular monthly update to the dashboard, or the regular updates to this. Are we going to get this on a regular basis, John, as a kind of updated set of data for us?
So
the answer is yes, but I think Alan Downton, who's in charge of this contract, would give you an even better answer.
Okay, Alan.
Yes, Andy, we are creating a dashboard that will come out monthly, and you can pick and choose what you need to go into. Patrick and I will talk to a number of members on the business board about the technical ability of that dashboard, but also the content. So we're going to raise that with you going forward. Okay, great. And then we can see a regular update at this meeting, because I think it's really helpful to see the latest data for the business board. And then I think there is a question for us that we need to keep coming back to, which is thinking about the various initiatives and activities that we are supporting and how well aligned they are to some of the pressures we see in the data. So if there's going to be a lot of pressure around jobs as we expect, asking ourselves the question of, are we really putting enough effort in the activities we're supporting on creation of jobs in the short term, is also going to be quite important. Yes. Okay, great. So we're asked to recommend Combined Authority approve Metro Dynamics report, subject to any final revisions following input from us today. So people happy to approve this report, and we look forward to seeing updates. And thank you, Patrick, and the team, and Alan, for your sort of oversight of this. That's great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go on the back of that to the COVID-19 local economic recovery strategy. And John, you're going to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, this obviously is designed to flow on from the last item. I draw members' attention to the fact that this is very much a first draft, and that there are limitations to this strategy. Its timing as an initial local economic recovery strategy for committee and board sign-off, ready to hit the ground running at the end of furlough, as we've just been discussing, with interventions that we can mobilise rapidly, actually does confer significant limitations on this first draft. Whilst it's benefited from something like 2 to 3 months of anecdotal input from local authorities and from business representatives, it's actually suffered from something like only 2 to 3 days exposure and correlation with the robust evidence base you've just been hearing about, which has taken time to assemble and complete, and is far, as you've just heard, is far from over as a story as the story continues to unfold. Hence, we propose to bring a second draft back in November that uses this evidence base you've just been discussing to do exactly what the chair was summing up at the end of that last item, in honing our interventions in the short term, and also our government asks in the longer term, in a way that is much closer or much more closely aligned to this evidence base, much like we did with the SPEAR and the local industrial strategy, which this current draft just doesn't do, because it was substantially created before the evidence base was there. However, all that being said, in the meantime, this first draft does provide us with what we do need now, which is a blueprint for a portfolio of interventions that we can mobilise in October, and for them to be active between that October and spring period, that first part of significant recovery. It's been co-created as a product by the local economic recovery subgroup, consisting of all 7 local authorities, 7 business organisations, the GCP, Public Health England, and even the police. It's been workshopped by members of the business board and been consulted with 100 local businesses. Whilst the COVID pandemic and its subsequent economic shock have raised a number of challenges, this LERS has a very optimistic vision to lead the nation out of recession by accelerating the recovery and rebound and renewal of our economy, achieving our ambition to double the economy by 2042, but in a more digitally enabled, greener, healthier and more inclusive way than before. You'll note by reading it, I hope, that it is based on the old pillars of the LIS, those being business environment, infrastructure, ideas and so on, but it does so in a way that is that we felt is expressed in a way that is more friendly and aligned to business, like accelerating startups, scale-ups and setups, that being business environment, accelerating high-tech growth, that being ideas, for instance. The interventions within each pillar are shown within Appendix 1, and perhaps we can talk about those if there are any particular questions. And it's important to note that virtually all of these interventions are funded and practically implementable immediately, and that is the theme of this strategy. However, those more strategic and underlying issues and interventions affecting our economy prior to COVID are dealt with through the CPCA's investment prospectus, which forms effectively the combined authorities' asks for future funding through the current comprehensive spending review. The draft does include the more recent economic evidence, but it doesn't relate closely enough to it. So given this brief exposure to this evidence base, we are suggesting that we bring a second version in November, and we task an independent body this time, rather than have a co-creation process through the economic recovery subgroup. We actually task an independent organisation with taking this evidence base on and actually looking how we should adapt what we've produced so far, particularly to accelerate the levelling up of some of our areas, and also to accelerate the recovery of the professional services and scientific areas, for instance, of Cambridge, but also they are the same sector that could potentially lead Cambridge, Greater Cambridge and the nation into a faster recovery, and have got most potential for it. So it is a very useful blueprint for mobilising what we've got funded in October through to spring, but it's only the first version, and we need to correlate it much better with the evidence base. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's very helpful to introduce. And this has been a rather rapidly moving feast, as you say, with various different people providing input. John Holditch, Councillor Holditch, your hand went up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Skills Board looked at this yesterday. It was a draft, but it was coming back in January, and the Skills Board asked for it to come back in November, which I think John did cover by telling you he's going to bring it back in November. It's such a fast moving.
We're losing, you're fading in and out a bit. I heard that the Skills Board discussed it yesterday. It was coming back in January, but there was a request to bring it back in November, which has been taken into account. Was there anything else, Councillor Holditch?
Sorry.
No, we've lost you again. I don't know if is that a problem at my end or his?
I think it's John's.
Yeah, it's quite a common problem with Councillor Holditch's connection.
Okay, if you want to put any other comments in chat, please do, and let me go to Faye.
Thank you, Andy. So yes, I've been involved in the ERSG meetings since the outset. So I think I've said it before in one of the subgroup meetings with the board, but just for the record, Dominica has done a fantastic job of working with all of the constituent parties. It most definitely has been a challenge, and I think we've got to a good level now. One thing that I was thinking about while you were talking, John, was at the point that this document is finished is the point we don't need it anymore. So I think we should set the expectation that it will never be finished and it will keep evolving. As we discussed today, I totally support the idea of having an independent now take it forward. You know, we have learned a lot through this first process, so I would like to see it, you know, being taken elsewhere and having then the economic development people locally doing the execution, because that is actually the most important part of it. So that's just my comments on the actual report. And then I had one question in that, apart from the subgroup meeting that a few of us attended, I certainly haven't seen the investment prospectus since. So that might be something that we want to pick up as a board too.
Great. Do you want to come back on the investment prospectus piece, John, and then I'll come to Rebecca? You're muted.
Blimey, if I had a penny for every time I've done that. Yes, the investment perspective isn't quite finished. We will certainly be bringing it to the business board in November, but also circulating it to you much earlier than that as soon as it's finished. And to be honest with you, that's another reason I think it's important that we do another iteration quickly of this local economic recovery strategy, better based on the evidence, because the first thing government will do when they look at our investment prospectus is ask us what's behind it in the way of evidence and recovery strategy. And at the moment, much as I hate to admit it, I don't think the recovery strategy gives us that clear connection with what should we be asking for in that investment perspective and that prospectus. And that's a big reason why I wanted to redo it quicker rather than January, do it immediately, so that we've got that evidence base and that strategy when the government say, tell me what's behind your investment prospectus.
Great. Rebecca?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I unfortunately couldn't attend the subgroup meeting, so it's really good to see all this here, and there's so much content, if you like, to go at. But of course, I completely echo what Faye and indeed John has said about needing to be a dynamic document and that moves and changes as we get further intelligence and information. The question I have really is whether you think, I say the general you, but I guess it's directed at you, John, thinks we're leveraging the digital connectivity and infrastructure we have in the county enough in this. There's lots of digital sort of through the piece around, particularly around digital skills. And in some ways, I'm not particularly asking from a business-based digital infrastructure, but we're fairly unique, I would say, now in the country in having two of our, our two biggest cities where the residents will have access to full fibre and gigabit speed. And that kind of chimes with the previous report, which talks about the spatial pattern of economic activity changing and what opportunities that gives us from having that added residential aspect in a way that other regions perhaps don't have, not in that concentrated way.
Yeah, I think the next either the November or January, but certainly I'd like to see the November piece have something more concrete on using and leveraging our digital capability. There's a very, I'm sure you've seen it, there's a very generic piece in there at the moment that's from county who are responsible for digital connectivity, that's sort of like a nice warm generic, we should all be a bit more digitally connected. But I think it would be nice in the next iteration if we came up with something very specific about what we want to do with digital technology and digital connectivity, and how it would really benefit and accelerate us to do that recovery faster.
I'd absolutely agree. And if you look at the West Midlands version, it talks about the connectivity, and it says, and this will deliver X amount of economic benefit, and this will deliver. And in some respects, we're already there. It's not a weakness for it, but maybe we're not promoting it as enough of an opportunity, assuming that we're not quite as far forward as considering it strength. I don't know where we are in that sense. Obviously, there's a difference between city and rural, but I think there's a definite opportunity there that we should look to capitalise on from an economic perspective, even though it's not directly targeted at businesses.
Yeah, Dom and I will take that away.
Yeah, let me bring Al in.
Thank you. After those kind of positive comments, I feel like I'm being pedantic, but reading through it, I was just looking, and the first appendix you come to is Appendix 1, which talks about all the different lines of investment that we've done and the job creation that we generated from that. And it's just a difficult one because I think it's a different context. But I really struggle with the University of Peterborough being reflected as 21,000 jobs, in the sense that isn't that more about the potential employees, candidates that will be generated for future provision? And whilst it's something that should be highlighted and celebrated, it kind of looks wrong alongside 141 jobs here because of this funding and 53. And in terms of people looking at that as the first backing document, I just wonder whether it's misleading in the way that it's signposted.
Yeah, I think it is. I will correct that. I think projects like university have to be dealt with in this document in a very different way to, for instance, interventions like the growth coaching or the skills brokerage that are really quite tactical. You can hit the ground and make big differences, although it's smaller numbers over short periods of time. So yeah, we will reflect that. But I think Peterborough University deserves to be there, but perhaps in a longer term context.
It may be possible to put it in both contexts. So there's a short term impact in terms of creating jobs, but there's also a longer term opportunity that in terms of the people it then trains to populate the workforce in the future. And you've got to get that longer term vision. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, we'll get the balance better.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments on this. So we are asked to recommend that the Combined Authority Board approve the first draft of the local economic recovery strategy, but also recognise, I think, that the second version will be developed by an independent group. People happy with that? Yep, great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to item 3.3. I'm going to hand the chair to Amir, and I think I get booted out to the waiting room, which probably means I can get a cup of tea. So I will see you. I will see you shortly.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. I'll wait for Andy to leave. Yes, I think.
Okay, he's in the waiting room now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, John, could I ask you to present the Business Growth Service, the full business case report, please?
Will do. And Emily, could you throw the slides up, please? The first thing I'm going to say is you will have noted that the full business case, because it's supposed to be that way and it's supposed to be comprehensive, is a monstrous document, which I'm sure you didn't enjoy reading. So in compensation, I'm going to keep the presentation about it short, and you can focus on questions thereafter. So the first slide is very straightforward, and it is a reminder to say that the Business Growth Service, represented here in the 5 blocks in red, is if not the flagship, certainly one of the core interventions, integrated interventions that are going to deliver the LIS. There's 12 elements of the LIS. This represents 5 of them, and that's really all that slide's designed to do, to say this is a big plank in our LIS implementation plan. So next, please, Emily. The next slide is really a very simple summary of what it is in its simplest form. It's an integrated program. When I keep saying integrated, what I mean is it's got a single front door. We're not going to pester all our businesses with 5 different or 4 different services. It's one service. It will be branded with something that is still to be determined with the successful candidate or successful bidder, but it probably won't be called the Business Growth Service because that's fairly boring. But it has very simply a service that finds our most exciting companies and coaches them to be more successful than they would otherwise have been, either by growing faster, growing higher, or growing longer. And all the evidence that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years in a bunch of countries tells us that 6% of SMEs are responsible for over 50% of all economic growth. Not growth amongst SMEs, all economic growth. So if we can find them and nudge them to grow more, we can have maximum effect on growing our economy. What that means is taking also the local economic recovery strategy and making sure that we're doing that in the right sectors, in the right places as well. But getting our indigenous companies to grow more is only part of the concept. We also need to attract more higher value and faster growing companies in, especially in places like Peterborough and the Fens, where we have in respect to Cambridge and South Cambridge, we have companies with lower value jobs in terms of wages and knowledge intensity. So we need to attract companies in, but we also need to attract companies in that increase our average knowledge intensity and wage level. Then, logically, if you've got all those companies arriving and growing, you need to feed them with the right people at the right time with the right skills. And that's what the skills brokerage is about. And then finally, if we've got all these companies growing, they will need funding for that growth, whether that's in the form of grants or in the form of equity investment for kit, equipment, or just the cash that growth requires. Next, please, Emily. Thank you very much. And then finally, this is a slide to assure and reassure members of the business board that you will get oversight and visibility of how this service is being delivered. On its bottom level there, where you see the Delivery Consortium Programme Management Office, you can see the different roles that we're told by the contractor will be filled by them to give that Programme Management Office interface with us. Our interface is our Programme Management Committee, which has got the 3 orange heads there, which are the directors of the growth company, which is the company we've created to deliver this and contract this. But on that Programme Management Committee, we will be looking for a member of the business board to act and interface on a monthly basis with this contracting consortium. Then above that, the chair of the growth company, who is currently being recruited, will present to the business board every other business board meeting, so every 4 months. And then that same person will also present to the combined authority board twice a year, so every 3rd meeting. So there is granular and layered oversight, including connections to the left with the local authorities to make sure we're delivering this in a way in East Cambs or in Wisbech that makes sense to the people, the council and the businesses there, but also on the right-hand side, the business community with the different business groups, making sure that we're delivering and satisfying them. If we could come off the slides, please. I'd only next highlight to you that the approval for the full business case was set out at the outline business case level in terms of a number of tests. I won't go through the answers to the tests. You can ask me those if you're not satisfied by the business case. But fundamentally, the tests were confirmation that the EU funding had arrived and is in place so that we can safely contract. Confirmation that we have indeed selected a delivery partner. Confirmation of a cash flow. Confirmation that we've been able to access HMRC data that they've got in a bit of a secret squirrel sense that they've compiled to give us, or to give them, visibility of what high growth companies look like simply by analysing their tax returns. And we've got access to that data, so we will be able to access or identify and target high growth companies. Then a huge legal advice that everything we're doing, whilst innovative, is entirely state aid compliant. And things like, have you got a sustainability and environmental policy? And can you substantiate the claims you're making that every growth coaching intervention will generate 2.8 jobs? We've also added 2 extra conditions. One's obvious, that we've adapted this thing to suit the COVID recovery strategy, and also that because we've got £927,000 of enterprise zone business rate receipts in this budget, that we've checked that post-COVID that they're still there. So that's a run through of what it is and a run through of the conditions that you're being asked to check that we've met in order to go through and delegate myself and John Holditch actually, and the Section 76 officer to contract and initiate this service, hopefully in mid-October.
Okay, John, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the members of the board?
No questions. I can just say that, you know, I've been involved partly watching the process, and it's been very thorough. And certainly the key points John's raised there have been really measured against the offers from the guys who are planning to supply this.
Thank you, Ritin. Tina, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wondered if the other partners that on either the district councils, etc., have seen this, and you know what stage it's at in their review.
Yeah. So we have been working with each of the economic development officers in each of the councils, and I think that's something like Appendix 5, maybe something like that. And they've drawn up with us an implementation plan for all of these services that is tailored to their locality. And we've also got, I'm afraid, an only half filled out table whereby we're looking at offers from them for basically office space as touchdown areas for staff within this service to actually deliver services to customers on their patch. And that's only half filled out at the moment. But they've been entirely and utterly involved, and mobilisation will involve them as well.
Thank you, John. Rebecca, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. I know there's been many other people who've been engaged in the detail of this than I, and it looks all very impressive in its detail. And yes, John, it gave me a headache reading it last night. But my question is, the financials look at 3 years, and 3 years is going to go in a flash. What are you thinking beyond that?
So I will be very frank. Programs like this have come and gone before over the last 15 years. I've seen a few of them. And they're usually accompanied by someone like me that says, oh, this is going to be so good that the market failure in SMEs taking up advice, both on skills and on coaching and on accessing growth finance, will be completely solved in this 3 years because this is so brilliant and you won't need it afterwards, except we all know that wouldn't be true. So I won't say that. And what I will say is in 3 years' time, we'll have the Shared Prosperity Fund. And I would expect that the results that we'll get from this programme will be sufficient that we would make a decision about whether we roll again, because the market failures haven't been permanently overcome, but we have had good results in growth that we wouldn't otherwise have got. So that's the answer. We would attempt to fund it again if that's what we all decide together is the right thing to do.
And John, I'm certainly glad you didn't say the second reason, which is that it will all run self-sustainably.
Oh yeah, that's the other lie.
Companies will pay for it, because that's the other thing that won't happen.
Yeah, but people in my position always say that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say that, because we know that doesn't happen. Okay, any other questions from anyone? Okay, right. In that case, I invite the business board to approve and adopt the full business case to mobilize the delivery of the business growth service, including agree the conditions for the full business case approval set at the outline business case. And John's already gone through all of those. So are there any objections to the recommendations in the report? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So I consider that approved. So should we bring Andy Neely back in, please? Welcome back, Andy, and I'll hand the chairmanship back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. So we're going to move to item 3.4, which is the governance update, and Dominiso is going to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. And in the interest of time, I'm going to try to rush through this. I'm conscious that we're trying to finish before 4:30. This paper follows on from our business board governance review that was brought forward to the board back in March. And that followed a business board member induction and governance review workshop that was held back in January. As a result of that workshop, there were a number of areas for improved governance and arrangements and recommendations to be implemented. We've been working on, officers have been working on implementing those recommendations, and the attached appendices sets out the progress made against those. You will note that the majority of these have been actioned or are being addressed, and I won't go through each recommendation in turn, but I will ask if there are any questions from members on any of the recommendations or actions in the appendices.
Great. Any questions or comments on this? Faye.
Sorry, I couldn't work out whether I was where I couldn't find the button, so I'm waving my hand and trying to find the button, but there you go. Yes, questions or comments. So again, broken record here. The talk about the conversation about we're not getting enough business board coverage outside in the external market. I know Edward is on listening in, so I'm hoping now he's in place we can actually start to change that, so it doesn't keep being an ongoing issue. And one thing that I thought was really good, and I guess it's going to be the agenda item in the next meeting in November, is the interaction and the best practices with other LEPs. And I think that that's going to be really interesting moving forward as well. So they were just my 2 observations.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments or observations on this one? No. So we're noting the progress on the preliminary recommendations and next steps outlined. Okay, great. Thank you.
Chair.
Item 3.5, Yeah, item 3.5, the nomination of the Greater Partnership Executive Board. Colleagues will have seen Austin's email from earlier on today. So just a really quick bit of background to this. I received a letter yesterday afternoon from the existing members of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly, the business members, the business representatives, basically saying they weren't concerned at all by the nominations that were being put forward, but they were concerned that it was in previous experience with the previous LEP, the chair of the LEP was a member of the Greater Cambridge Partnership, in theory a business representative, but didn't know it wasn't well enough connected to businesses locally to really be able to represent them in the Greater Cambridge Partnership. So that was the essence of the letter I received yesterday. I talked with John briefly about it, and we said we didn't think it was appropriate to really get into a discussion about this in Austin's absence, coupled with the fact that I didn't particularly want to disturb Austin's holiday. Austin disturbed his own holiday this morning, and so he and I spoke on the phone, and we agreed that we should just withdraw this paper, but that we'd like to try and make rapid progress on who the business board's representative on the Greater Cambridge Partnership Executive Board is, and so we will try and pick this up in between now and the next meeting with some discussions. So that's really just by way of update. Okay. And then I think we're on to the headlines for the business board headlines for the combined authority. So we have one which is about the local growth fund, and we've recommended the updates, including the change request for the photocentric LGF projects. The second one is recommending that the Peterborough City Centre project be supported, but the Cambridge Marketplace not supported, but we invite a resubmission. The third one was we approved the Metro Dynamics report, and I think flagged that it's very valuable data on what's happening in the region, and particularly this distinction between national and local issues. Fourth one is recommending the CA board approves the first draft of the local economic recovery strategy with a second version to be developed by an independent group. And the fifth one, sorry, is the business growth service. We're recommending something, but I don't know what we're recommending because I wasn't in the discussion. So I will let Amir subsequently summarise that for John to, or the officers to transmit on. The Combined Authority Board meeting, I believe, is a week on Wednesday. And so Austin will be back from holiday by then and will attend that and pass those messages on. Okay. Is there anything on the forward plan that members wanted to comment on? Faye? Or is that not hand?
Yeah, it was proper hand. Okay. Tina, I'm sorry, I'm being a broken record here. Agritech, November? Is that going to be on the November meeting agenda?
Were you expecting Tina to reply there, Faye, or?
Yeah, there's been a stalling of the process, and the last thing I got from Louisa said that there was a need to review what they were expecting the People Commission to do in the light of COVID, but no more information. So. Oh, Steve's not still on, is he? So I really don't know where it is. And they did write to the steering board and say that it's been delayed, but we only had one meeting. I will chase it up.
Okay, thank you. This is the Agritech strategy, sector strategy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's been hanging around for quite a while now.
Yeah,
it has, and we have such a great opportunity with it. And you know, it would be good to galvanise, and it just feels like it's dragging on.
And especially we saw what we saw in the COVID report earlier. Agriculture hasn't been that badly affected, so there's no real reason to not to get on with it.
No, in fact, there are some opportunities in agriculture. It seems to be, particularly at the moment with digital technology.
Yeah.
John, your hand's up. But you're on mute.
Again. That's a hat trick. Just to say that Steve will report on Agritech in the November meeting, so we'll make sure that's on the forward plan. And when I say Agritech, I mean the Agritech sector strategy. I'd just like to point out two things that need to go on the forward plan that I think I heard come up today. And that was we all said we wanted to see a regular dashboard. So yeah. I think we need an agenda item that looks at that pulse of information, that dashboard every month. And equally, we all talked about the importance of PR and the percentage of the companies we are helping that get through into PR. So that PR grid perhaps should be a regular standing item as well to share with board members.
Colleagues agree with that? I think they're both very sensible. Yes, seeing lots of nods. That'd be great. Okay. So I think that brings us to the end of the formal meeting. We will meet again as a business board on Tuesday, the 10th of November, and that will be the annual public meeting. Presumably still by Zoom?
Yes, still by Zoom. And if I may also mention, Steve and I are hopeful that we can get that University Phase 2 Research Centre LGF application into a state that we can call an extraordinary meeting in mid-October, but we'll keep you informed on that. We may not make that, and we'll bounce it to our normal November meeting. And Andy and Austin have already made the point to me that if it's not relatively early in October, what's the point in having an October meeting and just wait for November anyway?
Early next year.
I take that on board.
Yeah. And I think if we are going to try and, if you're likely to want one in October, it's probably worth penciling a date in, because if we leave it another 2 weeks and then try and get a date in mid-October, it's going to be impossible in people's diaries. So.
Yeah, Don will send a date out in the next day or so.
Okay, thank you all very much, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Nice and easy. Job well done. Thank you both. Hello, Councillor Holditch. Goodbye.